The Simple Path to God, discovering the way back to authentic faith. Father Spiridon Bailey is a priest of the Diocese of Great Britain and Western Europe of the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia, serving in England and Ireland. On this video podcast, he applies the teaching of the Church Fathers to modern life with reference to the Sunday Gospels. Here now is Father Spiridon.
On the feast of the conception of St. John the Baptist, the Church presents to us the first chapter of the Gospel of St. Luke, where we're told that St. John came in the power and spirit of Elijah. The power and spirit of Elijah because both St. John the Baptist and Elijah are forerunners. St. John the Baptist was the forerunner of Christ's first coming, his incarnation, when Christ came to us as Redeemer, and he continues to come to us as Redeemer. And Elijah will come again to announce the second coming, when Christ will return as Judge. This is the time when we receive Christ as Redeemer to prepare ourselves for when he comes as Judge. Christ said of St. John the Baptist that he was greater than all the prophets before him, anointed even in his mother's womb. St. Gregory Palamas has a beautiful phrase. He says, St. John the Baptist exceeded the world even before he saw it, there in his mother's womb. And of course he recognized the divinity of Christ when the Theotokos came close to his mother. Even in Elizabeth's womb, he knew that the Christ was close to him, and he kicked. Because Christ comes as the Word, and St. John the Baptist is the voice of God that proclaims the Word. The voice of God that calls the world to prepare itself to receive the Word. But St. John the Baptist, when he spoke, also identified and spoke out against evil. I apologize for the sound of the rain. St. John the Baptist recognized evil and he called it for what it is. As Herod passed, living an immoral life with his brother's wife, he called him to repentance. And Herod, as the world does, sought to silence the voice of God, silence John the Baptist, and had him imprisoned. And still he spoke out. And Herodias, through the dance of Salome, eventually had John the Baptist beheaded. The Fathers tell us that the dance of Salome is like the passions that can stir up desires in us, that can overcome the mind. The rational mind can lose sense of itself through the passions, and we can silence the voice of God to ourselves. We can lose the ability to hear the voice of God when we are so filled with passions. He is the voice of God, and he says, the voice of one crying out in the wilderness. St. John the Baptist goes out into the wilderness to call us to repentance, to prepare ourselves through repentance. He says, make the path straight, the path to our heart where Christ can dwell. We prepare our hearts through repentance that Christ will come to us as Redeemer. St. Gregory Palamas says to us that every one of us, to some extent, must enter into the wilderness, even if it's not outwardly, a wilderness in the heart, find a place of separation from the world, from its concerns, from its demands, from its intrusions and sins. And St. John the Baptist, of course, didn't go into the wilderness to be alone. He went out there to meet and be with God. And in the silence and separation of our hearts, that is what we are to do, to meet with God through prayer. St. John the Baptist lived a life of prayer. It isn't enough that we imitate the externals of St. John the Baptist's life. St. John, who lived out in the wilderness eating locusts and wild honey. And we should remember locusts and wild honey means locusts were fruit, wild honey was a form of wild plant, like a herb, that the Desert Fathers also ate. He wasn't going around eating insects. But he went out humbly, without shelter, with few clothes, little food. We who have so much need to, yes, be grateful for all that we have, but also recognize that we, our lives and who we are, do not consist. We are more than all of these things. This material wealth, this material comfort, we are more than this. We are born to be in communion with God. And so when we go out into the wilderness, we are to have a life of prayer that cultivates gratitude, but also we are to preserve what God had given us, that flame of faith that burns within us, that flickers. Preserve what God has given us and find healing from everything that the world has done to us and everything that we have done to ourselves. We are to meet with God in prayer, knowing that he comes now as Redeemer to enter into our hearts, that we may be ready to meet him when he comes.
The Simple Path to God, Discovering the Way Back to Authentic Faith. Father Spiridon Bailey is the author of several books, including Orthodoxy and the Kingdom of Satan and Journey to Mount Athos. You can email Father Spiridon at simplepath@ancientfaith.com. That's simplepath@ancientfaith.com. This has been a listener-supported presentation of Ancient Faith Radio.